The house was quiet in the way it gets when no one expects to be overheard. Late morning light moved slowly across the living room floor, catching on the edges of furniture I'd owned longer than most people in my life. The walls still held photographs I hadn't had the heart to move since my wife passed. Every object had a place. Every place had a memory. I was in the hallway just outside the kitchen when I heard my daughter's voice. Low, careful, not meant for me. "Yes," she said. "I've already spoken to the facility. They said if we move quickly it won't be too disruptive for him." I stopped walking. A pause. Then her voice again, softer this time. "I know it sounds harsh, but he's not managing the house the way he used to. And the property is too much responsibility at his age." At his age? I am in my late 60s. I still pay my own bills. I still cook my own meals. I still remember exactly where every document in this house is kept. I leaned against the wall and listened. "The doctor doesn't have to say he's incapable," she continued, "just that it might be safer. We can frame it as concern." Concern. That word landed harder than any insult. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe the channel and let me know in the comments where are you watching from. It helps more than you know. I stepped back quietly. Not because I was afraid to be heard, but because I needed to understand exactly what she believed she was doing. She ended the call a moment later and walked into the living room smiling like nothing had happened. "Dad," she said too brightly, "you should sit down. We need to talk." I did. She took a breath, folded her hands, and began the version she'd clearly rehearsed. "I've been worried about you," she said. "Since Mom passed, things have been harder. The house is big, the upkeep, it's a lot. I've lived here my whole life," I said. "I know," she replied quickly. "That's the problem. You're holding on." There it was. She talked about safety, about options, about a place where everything would be handled. A place where I wouldn't have to worry anymore. "And the house?" I asked. She hesitated, just for a second. "Well," she said, "it doesn't make sense for it to sit empty. We could manage it. Sell it if needed. Use the money to make sure you're comfortable." Comfortable. I looked at her and tried to remember when concern had started sounding like a business plan. "You've already talked to people," I said. She nodded. "Only to explore. Nothing final." That was a lie. Not a big one, just a practiced one. "I heard your call," I said calmly. Her face changed. Not guilt, not shame, annoyance. "You shouldn't have been listening," she said. I almost smiled. That night after she left, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was afraid, because my mind was busy fitting pieces together I'd ignored for too long. The assessments, the sudden interest in paperwork, the way she'd started asking questions about deeds and maintenance and insurance months ago. This wasn't panic. It was planning. The next morning I made coffee and opened a drawer I hadn't touched since my wife's funeral. Inside were folders neatly labeled exactly where I'd left them. I wasn't angry when I opened them. I was curious. Curious how someone could live in a house their entire childhood and never learn who actually kept it standing. By noon, I would make one phone call. Not to argue, not to accuse, just to make sure I understood the truth. And once I did, everything else would become very simple. By the time my daughter realized I wasn't confused, she would understand something far worse. I had been prepared the entire time. The lawyer answered on the second ring. That alone told me everything I needed to know. People who hesitate don't answer that quickly. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to be very precise." He didn't rush me. That's why I trusted him. I explained what I'd overheard. The call, the facility, the way concern had been wrapped around intention like it made it harmless. When I finished, there was a brief silence on the line. "She doesn't have the authority she thinks she does," he said finally. I closed my eyes. "That's what I thought," I replied. He walked me through it slowly. Not because I needed the explanation, but because clarity matters when family is involved. The house, the trust, the provisions my wife and I had put in place years earlier, back when love still made us careful instead of blind. Everything was intact. Nothing had been transferred. Nothing had been signed. And most importantly, nothing could be decided without me. "She can suggest," he said. "She can worry. She can even push, but she cannot move you, sell the house, or act on your behalf without your consent or a court order. And she doesn't have the grounds for that." I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the surface my wife and I had refinished together years ago. I traced a small scratch near the edge. I remembered exactly how it got there. Grief does strange things. It makes you generous with access. It makes you quiet when you should be firm. I had been quiet. That afternoon, my daughter came back. She didn't knock. She rarely did anymore. "I've been thinking," she said, walking in like she still owned the place. "About what we talked about." "We didn't talk," I said. "You talked." She frowned. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be." "Harder." I gestured for her to sit. She didn't. "I spoke to someone this morning," I said. Her eyes sharpened. "Who?" "My lawyer." That did it. Her posture changed. The practiced softness dropped away. "You don't need lawyers," she said. "This is family. Family doesn't plan behind closed doors," I replied. She exhaled sharply. "You're overreacting. I was just trying to help." "No," I said calmly. "You were trying to decide." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I could see the calculation happening in real time. "So what now?" she asked. "You're just going to pretend everything is fine?" "No," I said. "I'm going to pretend nothing." She crossed her arms. "You can't stop me from worrying." "I'm not trying to," I said. "I'm stopping you from acting." Her voice rose. "You're not thinking clearly." "I am thinking clearly," I replied. "That's what you weren't counting on." She left angry. Not loud, not dramatic, but irritated in a way that told me she'd lost control of the story she'd been telling herself. That evening I took out the old photo albums, not to wallow, but to remember something important. I had raised her in this house. I had fixed its leaks, paid its taxes, protected its future. I had also taught her right from wrong. Somewhere along the way, she had decided that love meant authority. It doesn't. The next day, a social worker called. Polite, neutral, professional. "I'm just checking in," she said. "We've received a concern." I listened. I answered. I invited her to visit. When she arrived, she found a clean house, a clear mind, and a man who knew exactly where he stood. She left with no concerns. That was the moment I understood something crucial. This wasn't about my ability to live alone. It was about my daughter's impatience to control what came after. And now that I knew the ground was solid beneath me, I could finally stop guessing and start choosing. When the paper trail failed to support her concern, my daughter changed tactics. And that's when the real pressure began. The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces. Small, plausible pieces. The kind that sound reasonable when taken alone but form something else entirely when you step back far enough to see the pattern. It started with visits. Not to see me, to inspect the house. My daughter walked through rooms she'd grown up in like she was preparing them for someone else. She commented on steps that might be a hazard. Rugs that could slip. Cabinets that were too high. "You shouldn't have to deal with all this," she said, shaking her head. "It's too much for one person." I watched her closely. This wasn't concern anymore. It was inventory. Then came the questions. Casual at first. Almost conversational. "Do you remember where the insurance papers are? Have you thought about what happens if you fall? Do you even know how much this place is worth now?" Each question landed softly. Each one carried weight. I answered them honestly, calmly. I didn't challenge her. I didn't accuse. I wanted to hear how far she was willing to go. Far, it turned out. A few days later, she brought pamphlets. She laid them out on the kitchen table like options on a menu. Clean, professional, smiling faces on the covers. "This one has medical staff on site," she said, "and this one has private rooms. You could bring your things." My things. As if the house itself was no longer one of them. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. She pressed her lips together. "You're being stubborn." "No," I replied, "I'm being present." She sighed the way people do when they believe patience entitles them to compliance. That night I noticed something else. Files missing from the drawer. Not everything. Just a few items. Copies of assessments. A list of contacts. Notes she must have taken while I was out. I didn't confront her. I made another call instead. This time it wasn't to a lawyer. It was to my doctor. We spoke for a while. About my health, my habits, my routine. He knew me well, had for years. When I explained what was happening, he didn't sound surprised. "It's more common than you think," he said. Adult children confuse concern with control, especially after a loss. He agreed to document everything. My health, my independence, my capacity. That mattered, because 2 days later the next call came. This one wasn't polite. It was urgent. "I've arranged an assessment," my daughter said. "They'll be here tomorrow." "No," I said. She paused. "Dad, you don't arrange things like that for me." I continued, "Not without asking." She lost her composure then. "I'm trying to protect you," she snapped. "You don't even realize how vulnerable you are." I kept my voice even. "You're trying to decide for me," I said. "Those are not the same thing." She hung up. The assessment never happened. Not because I stopped it. Because it couldn't proceed. No consent, no authority, no grounds. When she realized that path was closed, she tried another. She suggested a temporary stay, just to see how it feels, just until things settle. I declined. She suggested handling my finances, paying bills for me, managing expenses. I declined. Each refusal frustrated her more than the last. By the end of the week, her tone had changed completely. "You're making this difficult on purpose," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm making it accurate." She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes scanning the house like it was already slipping away. "You think you're winning something," she said, "but you're just delaying the inevitable." I looked at her and felt something I hadn't expected. Sadness. Not for myself. For the moment she had chosen this over honesty. "I'm not delaying anything," I said. "I'm clarifying it." She left without another word. That evening I sat in the living room with the lights off, the house quiet around me. I thought about the years after my wife passed, how grief had softened my boundaries, how access had replaced respect. That was over now, because once someone tries to move you out of your own life, you don't owe them politeness anymore. You owe yourself clarity, and I had never been clearer. When every gentle option failed, my daughter made one final move, and this time, she did it in writing. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, plain envelope, no return address. Official enough to make my stomach tighten before I even opened it. Inside was a formal notice, not from a care home, not from a court, from a mediation service. The language was careful, neutral, padded with phrases like family concern and best interests. It invited me to attend a session to discuss future living arrangements. I read it twice. My daughter hadn't succeeded in moving me, so she decided to document me. That was the moment the situation shifted from emotional to procedural. I called my lawyer again. He listened, then let out a quiet breath. "She's trying to establish a record," he said. "It's not about winning right now, it's about creating a pattern of resistance, of refusal, of alleged instability. That ends now," he added, "but only if you're willing to be very clear." I was. We prepared carefully, not defensively, deliberately. Medical statements, financial records, maintenance logs, proof of independence going back years. I hadn't realized how much of my life was already documented until I saw it all laid out. When the day of mediation came, I arrived early. My daughter arrived confident. She greeted the mediator warmly, touched my arm like she was reassuring a child, sat close enough to feel possessive. The mediator began gently, asked how I felt, asked what I wanted. "I want to stay in my home," I said, "and I want my daughter to stop making decisions for me." My daughter smiled thinly. "I'm just worried," she said. "He forgets things. He refuses help. He's isolated." I slid the folder across the table. "My medical records," I said. "My financials, letters from my doctor and social worker, maintenance receipts, tax history." The mediator flipped through them slowly. The room changed. My daughter's voice tightened. "This doesn't prove he's safe. It proves he's capable," the mediator replied. Silence followed. Not angry silence. Uncomfortable silence. The mediator asked my daughter a few more questions about timelines, about authority, about why she hadn't spoken to me directly before contacting outside services. Her answers unraveled. She contradicted herself, backtracked, corrected. When it was over, the mediator closed the folder and looked at her. "You've overstepped," she said gently. "Your father does not require supervision, placement, or intervention." I didn't look at my daughter. I didn't need to. The damage was already done. Outside, she confronted me. "You embarrassed me," she said. "No," I replied. "You documented yourself." She stared at me like she was seeing someone else. "You could have just agreed to try," she said. "And you could have asked," I replied. We stood there a moment longer. Then she left. That evening, my lawyer called. "She can't try that again," he said. "Not without serious consequences." "Good," I replied. But the story wasn't over, because when people lose quietly, they rarely stop immediately. They regroup. They tell themselves a different story. And that's exactly what my daughter did next. Once the paperwork failed, she reached for the only thing she hadn't used yet: guilt. Guilt doesn't arrive loudly. It slips in through memory. My daughter started calling again. Not to argue, not to push paperwork, just to remind me of things. "Do you remember when you carried me up the stairs when I broke my ankle? You always said you'd take care of me. Mom would want us to stick together." She never mentioned the care home. She didn't need to. Each call was framed as reconciliation, but carried the same weight. "You owe me." I listened. I didn't interrupt. Because when guilt becomes a strategy, the truth reveals itself quickly. One afternoon, she showed up unannounced. No folders, no pamphlets, just tears. She sat on the couch where her mother used to sit and cried quietly, hands folded in her lap like a child who knew she'd gone too far. "I was scared," she said. "I didn't know how to handle everything after Mom." I believed that part. Grief distorts judgment. It makes people grab for control when they feel powerless. But grief doesn't excuse manipulation. "I forgive you," I said. Her head snapped up. "But I'm not forgetting," I continued. "And I'm not handing you authority you didn't earn." She opened her mouth to protest. I raised a hand. "You're my daughter," I said. "Not my guardian, not my decision-maker, not my replacement." She nodded slowly. "So what happens now?" "I stay," I said, "here, in my home. And we reset our boundaries." I told her what that meant. No access to documents, no conversations with professionals about me without me present, no assumptions about my future. She agreed, reluctantly. Before she left, I handed her an envelope. Inside was a copy of the updated paperwork. Clear, legal, final, everything protected. She didn't argue. She just looked tired. After the door closed, I sat alone in the living room and felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because I'd won, because I no longer had to wonder who I was dealing with. Some relationships don't end with shouting. They end with clarity. And clarity, I'd learned, was the most generous thing I could offer myself. When my daughter finally understood what forgiveness actually meant, she realized it came with limits. And those limits would define what happened next. The house feels different now. Not quieter. It was always quiet, not emptier. I've lived alone since my wife passed. Clearer. That's the word. Clarity changes the way you move through a place. I walk differently now. Slower but steadier. I don't brace myself when the phone rings. I don't wonder what conversation is coming next or what concern is hiding something else. My daughter and I still speak, carefully. She visits occasionally. She asks before she assumes. She listens more than she used to. Sometimes she still slips. A comment about safety, a suggestion disguised as advice. And when she does, I remind her gently where the line is. She respects it, not because she wants to, because she has to. Forgiveness didn't make us close again. It made us honest. And honesty, at this stage of life, is worth more than closeness built on control. I stay in the house. I tend the yard the way my wife liked it. I fix small things when they break. I sit on the porch in the evenings and watch the street like my father once did, not because I'm waiting for anything, but because I belong here. The house was never the issue. Authority was. People confuse age with weakness, grief with confusion, silence with consent. I made that mistake too for a while. I thought letting things slide was kindness. It isn't. Kindness without boundaries teaches people the wrong lesson. I didn't punish my daughter. I didn't embarrass her. I didn't take anything from her. I simply took back what was always mine. The right to decide my own life. And once that was clear, everything else fell into place. If you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.